So, good afternoon and welcome to the College of Continuing and Professional Studies webinar from self-doubt to confidence. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Shanta Bulai and I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. If you have future questions about the webinar or other programs we offer, the contact information will be listed on the last slide of the presentation. I'm delighted to introduce the topic for today's webinar, from self-doubt to confidence. Have you ever doubted your abilities or feared being exposed as a fraud despite clear success? These feelings, commonly called imposter syndrome or imposter phenomenon, as recognized by the American Psychological Association, affect people across job roles, genders, and social status. While some experience brief self-doubt during transitions, for others, it can erode confidence, energy, resilience, and effectiveness over long periods of time. You may occasionally experience symptoms such as perfectionism or fear of failure without long-term impact, while others may be more seriously compromised in their career growth and leadership potential. The good news, there are proven ways to minimize these thoughts and build authentic confidence. The webinar will help you recognize symptoms and risk factors associated with self-doubt, imposter syndrome, and related challenges. Manage doubt constructively and attribute success and failure in healthy ways. And finally, clarify and manage expectations and self others through strengthening confidence, well-being, and workplace performance. It's a pleasure to introduce the presenter for today's webinar, Carolyn Morris. Carolyn has applied psychology and business insights to challenges faced by leaders and teams as an organizational consultant, speaker, and coach, focusing on candor, accountability, and change for more than 30 years. Carolyn, thank you so much for being with us here today, and I'll pass it over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Shanta, and the whole team for making this webinar happen. Welcome, everyone. We have a lot to discuss, and I'm sure you read my first teaser for today by Susie Kassem. Doubt kills more dreams than failure ever will. Now, this may not apply to everyone equally. I hope it doesn't, but it's a good way to shake us up about the thought hygiene that we practice and how we look at doubts. So let me ask you a question, everyone. What do you think Supreme Court Judge Sotomayor, actor Tom Hanks, and tennis player Serena Williams might have in common? Think of the topic of today. Yes, probably many of you guessed it right. All three of them have spoken at some point in their extremely successful career about imposter phenomenon and about extreme self-doubt. So, welcome everyone to this hour of recognizing the quiet and sometimes way too loud voice, that inner voice that can hold you back. Today is not about eliminating doubt altogether. Even if I would have that magic wand, I don't think I would use it, because there is such a thing as healthy self-doubt and unhealthy self-doubt, which we will dive into. Today is about learning how to keep self-doubt from running the show. So even the most accomplished professionals struggle with it at times. And so the challenge is to not erase self-doubt altogether, but to learn how to navigate it, to recognize it swiftly, and to do the work, mostly the inner work, of keeping it contained and keeping it within healthy boundaries. So let's get started. And Shanta was already so kind to mention the three objectives for today. The only thing I will add to that is what is written here about the images that you will see. I give credit to pixabay.com, where you can get royalty-free and copyright-free images for your presentations. So, symptoms, risk factors, and the impact of self-doubt and imposter phenomenon elements. Now, this is part one of a three-part conversation with you, and I invite you to actively apply whatever you hear, whatever questions I pose to you, to your personal situation. And it's not about knowing things, but it's about doing something with what we know. So I will invite you regularly, or at least twice, to participate actively in chat, and to make personal commitments, because this webinar is about you and no one else. So welcome to the human condition, people. I think that I can safely say that no one on this planet, or any other planet for that matter, likes or loves to make a mistake. No one loves to fail. I have yet to meet the first client who says, when I wake up in the morning, I'm so excited to make a mistake and to fail. Now, we all know from serial entrepreneurs and startup gurus that they appreciate failing in the sense of mining wisdom from mistakes and failure in order to learn, grow, gain insights, and move on smarter, more strategic, more thoughtful, more client or customer focused. But I don't think anyone gets up being authentically excited about making a mistake. Yet people with pervasive and what I like to call unhealthy self doubt and those IP symptoms, imposter phenomenon symptoms, they experience it more as a disaster. Maybe not literally, maybe you or they don't use the word disaster, but it is a very strong sense of failure, of shame, of embarrassment. And people who do not experience significant self doubt or those IP symptoms, and maybe some of you are in the room, I hope so, they know that you know you cannot be always good at everything all the time or from the very first beginning. I was working with a coaching client early this morning, and we were talking about her leadership commitments for 2026 as she is leading a nonprofit in the cancer research space. And she talked about distinguishing between the utmost meaningful differentiating priorities and the second bucket, good enough leadership. And she said, I have high expectations and high standards, but certain things I learned through my journey with you, Caroline, they are okay if they're good enough. So that is an interesting perspective for anyone in the room who may identify as a perfectionist. There's so much beauty in being a perfectionist to a certain extent. And I invite everyone who recognizes that in themselves to prioritize what you want to really excel at rather than in everything. So, one strategy out of that self-doubt and IP, remember that stands for imposter phenomenon, predicament, challenge your imposter logic or the lack thereof, and reframe from an imposter life to an imposter moment. So think bigger picture. And Shanta was so kind to address that in the introduction about this webinar. We have all had moments of doubt that temporarily maybe held us back or had a short-term negative impact. Yet that is very different from it holding you back for a lifetime or structurally, long term. And much of that has to do with how you frame and reframe, how you talk to yourself, and which of your thoughts and assumptions and beliefs you believe about yourself. So, symptoms of self doubt and IP. The American Psychological Association recognizes IP. It is not a formal diagnosis in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, shortened as DSM-5. So it's not an official formal diagnosis, but it is recognized as a real issue for many people. So they describe it as that pervasive, important element of the definition, feeling of self-doubt. So not occasional, not when you transition companies or when you are promoted into a more high profile or different or stretch position, because that fits the situation and is usually temporary. But that pervasive feeling of self-doubt, insecurity, incompetence, and despite the evidence of skill and success, which I think we can all agree Sotomayor, Tom Hanks, and Serena Williams have demonstrated their capabilities, skills, their brilliance, their success. Whether you think they're the best tennis player, actor, or Supreme Court judge, whether you agree with their thoughts and their perspectives on lives or not, they are accomplished, successful people. So feeling like a fraud stems from your and my thoughts. And one of them could be, what gives me the right to be here? Another one could be, I wonder how long it takes before they find out about me. And those are not helpful thoughts. If you reframe that in, I wonder what I can do to focus on what I'm already good at and to feel okay with asking questions and acknowledging what I still have to learn, that is a beautiful reframing, as opposed to, I wonder when I'm being found out and, oh gosh, what gives me the right to be here right now? So there are two psychologists, just briefly, a little historical, but very briefly, in the 1970s, Suzanne Imes and Pauline Clance. I don't remember what the R stands for. They talk about imposter phenomenon occurring among high achievers who are unable to internalize and accept their success and often attribute their accomplishments to outside factors such as luck rather than ability, hard work, and learning. And they fear that others will at some point unmask them as a fraud. And that is something that they said we need to find ways to stop that because this is self harming or, at a minimum, self debilitating. Now, another expert, a little more recent, Dr. Valerie Young, if you look her up online, you will find articles, I think a book, and some videos. She talks about 5 types of imposters, so to speak, and see which ones you may recognize a little in yourself. And maybe it's a combination. First, the expert, not being satisfied when finishing a task until you know everything about the subject. Analysis paralysis is one of the results of that. So the time spent on information gathering and figuring it all out can make it hard to complete tasks and projects. Likely that is not always the case, but it could happen regularly with expert imposters. The perfectionists, already mentioned, very high levels of anxiety, doubt, and worry because of extremely high and likely at times unrealistic expectations, setting extreme goals you're unable to achieve, and then focusing too little on the improvement and on what you are achieving. Thirdly, the natural genius, mastering new skills easily, which is awesome, but you may feel or likely feel ashamed and weak when faced with a goal that feels like it's insurmountable or really hard. And those people might not realize that other people struggle to achieve goals as well, and that doesn't diminish from their worthiness. Number 4, the fourth type of imposter, the soloist, or otherwise known as the rugged individualist, according to Valerie Young. They prefer to work alone. Nothing wrong with that in and of itself. Of course not, because we are uniquely different people and we have unique preferences. Some of us are more collaborators, others are individual contributors who love to work alone. Nothing wrong with that. So don't misread this. But asking for help becomes a problem for those rugged individualists who believe, who tell themselves that that reveals their incompetence. Have you ever worked with someone, or maybe even had a boss, or currently a direct report, who really has a hard time saying, I don't know, or I don't know how to do this, or I need some help with this? And that doesn't mean that they're necessarily in denial. It doesn't mean that they don't want to be good at stuff, because they likely do. But it could be that they equate asking for help, asking questions, acknowledging that they are not, don't have the skill to do something yet, that will reveal total incompetence. And that's where they go wrong. So they may even turn down support. And I see that sometimes in my coaching practice in an attempt to prove their self worth. So establishing a trusting relationship and helping them reframe both the brilliant skills and insights they already have, as well as the lacking, missing skills and insights into a normal journey in life, a normal journey in professional life. And then number five, the superhero. They often excel due to extreme effort. They are the workhorses, the really hard workers, sometimes called workaholics, and that can lead to burnout and to all kinds of physical problems, many more than I can fill in 1 hour. So the superhero, soloist, natural genius, perfectionist, and expert, likely you don't recognize any of these purely. Maybe you do. Maybe there was a combination. Maybe you're even thinking of loved ones who you recognize in some of these descriptions, or colleagues, direct reports. So let's talk about some risk factors for IP, even though some of them you and I cannot really influence a lot. For example, your family environment that you grew up in. It could be having a gifted sibling, the emphasis being on achievement only. I have a client, the really strong leader of a marketing company, who said that only when you accomplished and achieved stuff in school with sports, there were expressions of love towards me and my siblings. And they speak highly of their parents, well intentioned, very accomplished, warm, good people. Yet the emphasis was on achievement only, as opposed to on effort. One of the things I did when we moved our family with children ages 7, 10, and 10, so yes, twin girls and a son, when we moved from my home country, the Netherlands, to the US, I realized that some things were going to be back in square one for them because they didn't speak the language yet. I taught them some survival phrases like thank you and I don't know and yes, please and stuff like that, but that was all. And they often didn't know when to use those phrases. So they didn't speak the language. And there were quite a few other things that were different between the cultures and the educational systems. So I started with acknowledging their hard work and all they invested before every exam rather than after receiving their grade back. And I remember one of our son's friends being at our house and saying, "You're a really weird mom, Mrs. Morse." And I said, "Oh, it's interesting. Tell me what makes me weird," because I generally think that it could be a positive thing, but maybe not. And he said, "Yeah, Martin told me you take him out for lunch right before the exam. But he hasn't shown anything yet. He doesn't even have his grade back yet." And I said, "Well, but I saw that he was putting in all the work and diligently studying." So, emphasis on achievement only is one way that we can, as parents or caretakers, play a role either one way or the other way in toning down the self doubt and the IP risk factors. And then mixed messages by, again, well intentioned parents, overpraise as well as a lot of criticism. Depression and anxiety, when we look at psychiatric diagnosis, are often seen in people with strong intellectual self doubt. We psychologists, psychiatrists haven't figured out the exact connections yet, so that remains a topic of study. New challenges can be a risk factor. IP seems more common among people facing a new endeavor. And again, if that is contained self doubt, if it is temporary, and if you know what kind of inner work to do, it doesn't have to become a real risk factor for IP, right? And then being from a marginalized population group. Some studies say that IP, imposter phenomenon, is present in all cultures, all social groups, all socioeconomic groups, and other studies tell us that in certain populations it tends to flourish more easily than in others. Some compounding factors: social pressures, societal stereotypes about people with a certain skin color, certain gender, and then a real compounding factor and a warning sign for all of you, including myself. Most people suffer in silence. Do not talk about it, like Sotomayor, Tom Hanks, and Serena Williams, and many others, of course. They don't have to be famous, right? So please spread the word about it's okay to acknowledge self-doubt and recognizing imposter phenomenon. I have so many leaders who talk to me like that. I'm invited at conferences and into companies to speak about it because we want to normalize the conversation about it so that you don't have to suffer in silence, and so that you do see that so many people are doing the work. And we can even learn from others who recognize these symptoms. So, a couple of things, and I don't want to stick with this too long because you probably notice how it may show up at work if you recognize strong, pervasive self doubt and elements of imposter phenomenon. It's the perfectionism we discussed, making yourself small. Some people, when they enter a room, almost grasp the door and make themselves small rather than walking in straight spine, head up. And yeah, it can be a fine line whether you enter a room with confidence or more arrogantly. Yet I like to think that everyone in the room is smart enough to realize or to know how to combine confidence with interest in others and with what I like to call humility. So things like not asking for that promotion or a raise, remaining silent in meetings when you really have something to say. So I'm not talking about you really have to say something every single time or have to repeat in different words what someone else just said, but speaking up when you think you may have something to add. Over preparing, rarely asking for help. We talked about that. Another one we haven't addressed yet is second guessing your decisions, working with two executives currently that are still in the recovery phase of extreme second guessing their decisions. Undervaluing your own contributions while maybe overvaluing others, but even if you don't do the latter, you matter and your contributions matter. How do you sell your contributions? Again, not asking you to become the big loudmouth. I don't ask you to become arrogant. I do ask you to acknowledge your own contributions as you may others. Excessive double checking, which is related to the second guessing and the paralysis analysis, hesitating to speak up not just in meetings but in general, whether it's in a restaurant and you're not happy with the table you were assigned or with how your food looks or tastes. So, hesitating to speak up in all kinds of settings. And then, in a more extreme form, IP could show up as a stalled career. Now, there are other reasons for a stalled career, so this is not the only one. But in summary, this can lead to less well being and it can even lead to long term stress, which then, if we don't act timely and strategically and intentionally, could lead to burnout. You and I don't want that. So, reflection time. Please share in chat. What is a situation where self doubt is likely to show up for you? And you can just write a couple of words. If you want to, you can write elaborately in chat, but describe in a few words a situation where self doubt is likely to show up for you specifically. And I'm seeing some responses coming in. That's awesome. Yep, when overwhelmed in a group, in a social setting, in the presence of executives. Yeah, not being sure about a project. Excellent. Yes. So, part two, reducing that inner critic, knowing which situations trigger it. So, I already mentioned the technique of reframing unhelpful inner dialogue. Didn't call it that. I think I called it thought hygiene. So, let's go to the next one. Yes. Your and my precious self talk. And sometimes it's not so precious, people. I really want to emphasize that what you and I say to yourself matters, and it matters greatly because healthy self talk is a powerful lever in moving you from that debilitating, roadblocking self doubt to empowering confidence. So, what are the quality of the thoughts and the beliefs that you have about yourself? So, the way that you and I speak to ourselves is often unconscious. So, we want to make that more conscious. We want to analyze, might be too big of a word, but we want to become aware of what shapes your beliefs, your focus, especially when maybe a project or a presentation or a conversation didn't go exactly as planned. Do you focus on everything that went wrong? Or do you focus first on all the things that went according to plan or where you were able to pivot? And then you look at what lessons can I learn to move on differently in a next similar situation? So you do want to learn from missteps, misjudgments, unfortunate utterings. Yet, if that is the only thing that you and I focus on, then we're feeding that precious negative self doubting self talk. So it shapes your energy and your sentiments, of course. I have yet to meet the first person who has had many thoughts of self doubt on a given Monday and then goes home and feels really happy and energized about where they are and how they showed up, right? And then the way that you and I speak to ourselves, it informs our actions and our choices, how we even speak to someone else about a presentation or a meeting. I am all about soliciting feedback about webinars, coaching sessions, consulting gigs, because I do honestly want to match my clients, or not even match, I want to exceed their expectations. I want to learn from their experiences. You, I am sure, want to learn whether there might be at times a gap between your intent and the impact you had on others, whether that was with a presentation, with an argumentation, with how you handled a difficult topic, or how you listened to someone and helped them problem solve. Yet we also want to hone in on what is already going well, the opportunities that we did grasp, the moments that you were pivoting in a more than good enough way. And that is what we call positive psychology. It means that you're also focused on everything that you do have, you know how to do, and that is going well, in addition to mining wisdom from feedback and from experiences. Yes, please. So, this is all the cognitive behavioral approach by cognitive neuroscientifically educated experts. One of them was Albert Ellis. He passed away in the late 90s. He wrote a really good book, which is called How to Keep People from Pushing Your Buttons. And maybe that doesn't sound like a title that 100% fits this topic, yet it fits how you can practice thought hygiene. And it fits how you can use or turn non rational beliefs and thoughts into more rational and realistic beliefs and thoughts. And he says, and other experts that believe in his approach say that any irrational belief that you may hold about yourself or about others stems from a core should, must, have to, or absolutely need statement or belief. And he talks about three common irrational beliefs, but there are many variations. One is I must do well always from the beginning. I must win approval, or, and the must is related to the or, If I don't, I'm a worthless person. I don't belong here. I shouldn't be in this position. I will be found out as a fraud, etc. The second one, the big category, is you must treat me, you manager of mine, you direct report, you peer from another department. You must treat me considerately and fairly. And if you don't, you are a bad person. Now, do I appreciate and expect fair treatment for everyone in the room, regardless of all the beautiful, unique, defining factors that distinguishes us from each other? Yes, absolutely. I am not talking about accepting unfair treatment in any kind of way, yet it is the must that we put on others where the fairness and the consideration is more of a personal interpretation rather than fair and equal and equitable treatment in the workplace. So please separate those two. And then number three, life and the conditions under which I live must be easy, fair, or comfortable. It's terrible if they are not. So, three groups of musts, needs, shoulds that can trip us up. Maybe you recognize one of these, maybe you don't, but these are called rigid demands that then color every interaction that we have, every interpretation about interactions and about our own actions, as opposed to seeing them as flexible preferences or things to assertively bring to someone's attention and to a conversation. Because it's absolutely acceptable and desirable to get approval from the people we work with if we deliver something really good, right? But making that a conversation if it doesn't happen, showing up assertively rather than keeping it inside and developing negative stories, either about ourselves or about others. Yes. So, negative inner dialogue can magnify how we experience mistakes and how we talk about mistakes. It may fuel your hesitation, and it certainly long term will, not can, long term, it will erode your self esteem and your self worth. That's not where you want to go. That's not where you are, I hope. And that's why we are talking about this significant topic. On the other end of the spectrum, constructive and realistic self talk creates space for learning from mistakes, for taking different perspectives, for building resilience, for being self compassionate, like you may be compassionate when others make a similar mistake or have a similar whatever it is that didn't go extremely well. And it makes space for growth. And being on the road to managing self doubt so that it only shows up in a healthy way, as in inviting contrarian views, being open to different opinions without then thinking that you yourself aren't qualified or might even be dumb. That healthy self doubt is something that we can create, and it's a journey. It's something that you and I may work on for the rest of our lives. And so that healthier self talk includes a couple of things, very practically: catching early or detecting, becoming aware, and challenging those limiting narratives that you may hold about yourself and about the work that you deliver. It's about reframing that harmful thinking patterns into more realistic and helpful ones. And to that, you can invite other people to the thought hygiene party. Ask those trusted colleagues or friends or family members, when you're in doubt or after having made a mistake, what do you do to pick yourself up? How do you keep the stories about yourself healthy? Being honest with yourself, still learning, yet also preventing that self worth going down and fueling hesitation. And then the third one is building a mindset that sustains that confidence long term, also, and maybe even especially in the face of setbacks. So let's look at that some more. I mentioned the word awareness. Awareness is key. What are the things you may tell yourself when you're unsure or when you face a challenge? So I will have you look at these sentences and see which one you may recognize, even if it is not exactly what you tell yourself. But these could be some of the things you at times tell yourself when you are presenting to executives, or you get crickets when you're presenting something in a team meeting, or when you have to speak in large social settings. Just three of the examples that you so kindly wrote in chat. So think about the sentences that you tell yourself and how can you reframe these? If I don't get this perfectly right, I will still live and I will learn and I will acknowledge whatever I didn't get perfectly right. No, I didn't just get lucky. Luck and my ability and my preparation and my efforts all came together beautifully. So these are just two examples of rephrasing. So let's continue. Next slide, please. Yes, reframing in the voice of the inner coach as opposed to the inner critic. Just a couple of examples. On the left hand, I don't belong here. Everyone else is more qualified than me. You can change that into, I was invited here for a reason. My contribution clearly will add value. On the left-hand side, the voice of your inner critic, if I speak up, I'll probably say the wrong thing or make a fool of myself or whatever it is that you may have ever thought. Turn that into speaking up helps me grow. Even if it is not perfect or not the brightest comment, it still is worthwhile. On the left-hand side, the voice of the inner critic, I cannot make a mistake or people will think that I'm not smart enough, that I don't belong here, that I'm not capable. Turn that into your inner coach voice. Progress matters more than perfection. Unless you are a heart surgeon, or, I mean, there are situations and there are settings, context in which you and I accept perfection. And even there, it doesn't happen, right? So, how I handle mistakes shows my competence as much as not making any mistakes. How about that reframing? Inner critic, I'm not ready to take on this challenge. And sometimes that might be realistic and a true good assessment. But it could also be that you almost always think that way about yourself. Turn that into your inner coach. I may not feel ready yet, with the emphasis on yet, but I can learn and I can figure things out step by step. And then the last example of reframing from inner critic to inner coach. Uh, Everyone else or most others are much more confident and more capable than I am. You can turn that into I bring unique strengths and perspectives that are valuable. So, just a couple of examples. Whatever your inner critic sentences and statements about yourself may be, write them out, people. Write them out and find more realistic inner coach versions. And for those of you who don't mind using AI, they can help with this as well. So, let's go to the next piece. To be clear, healthy self doubt helps you recognize that you're not always right, which I call intellectual humility. I think I'm right quite a few times about stuff, and I know I'm not always right. And that's totally okay, and it's normal. I've never met a person who's always right. Healthy self doubt helps you critically examine and sharpen assumptions, approaches, solutions. And it results in true learning, in better decisions, in career jumps, and in more effective actions with your team members, with your boss, with customers or end users or clients. Now, looking at unhealthy self doubt, that is when it becomes a more long term chronic state that turns into a constant present inner critic that we just addressed. I can't, which then becomes, if we're unfortunate, a self-fulfilling prophecy. I didn't, but I should have, which becomes self-sabotaging. You and I cannot change what just happened or the distant past. You and I can only influence how we show up now and how we mine wisdom from the past in order to show up a little more informed or capable or differently this time. I shouldn't, which is that imposter. I shouldn't be here. I shouldn't have been promoted. I shouldn't have been invited to this executive team meeting. And then I'm terrible at, which leads to a lack of self compassion and realism, self realism. So please distinguish between where healthy self doubt leads to intellectual humility, to you inviting contrarian views in order to enrich your thinking, as opposed to unhealthy self doubt. Yes. And let's move to part 3. I already discussed strategies, but some more strategies to strengthen authentic confidence. Let's do it. So, 3 main strategies, because authentic confidence is different from bravado or faking it till you make it. I think of Dharma Shah, the founder or co-founder of the company HubSpot. In 2013, he wrote an article on LinkedIn about the 9 quality of what was it? Truly confident people. And the first one is they take a stand because they not because they think they are always right, but because they're not afraid to be wrong. So it's not out of bravado, but it's out of being okay, appearing human and real. So authentic confidence is grounded in realistic self-awareness. So being aware of how you show up in the moment, how you enter a room, how you project your voice, the word choice, it's consistent practice, and it's also recognizing your real contributions and your real signs of progress on that journey. So, anchor your confidence in evidence, track your wins and progress, keep a log of challenges and how you overcame them, ask for feedback, and review that log for high stakes situations. Another strategy that fits this a little bit is having 7 sentences, very brief ones, no more than 4 to 5 words, that you believe about yourself most of the time, doesn't have to be always, and that are positive statements of you. For example, you might write down, I'm generally a really good listener. I really care about my work and my people, and whatever other sentences that could be. Build your competence through preparation. Obviously, you've heard this when you grew up from your parents or caretakers. We all know how preparation can help us. And for those of you who fall in the category of paralysis analysis, you may have to cut back on the preparation, right? Because too much of a good thing can turn into a bad thing. And then, like I stated, maximize your body and your presence, how you enter, how you sit down, how you look at people, how you use your voice. And I work a lot with leaders on making them aware. I had a very young, a 28-year-old, extremely financially smart person of a private investment firm who always made himself small and who spoke very softly. And of course, we don't change how tall we are. The changes in how we use our voice are easier to accomplish. Actors have to do that. Yet, being aware of how you use your body is the first step to making those changes. So, let's go to some more strategies. Normalizing struggle and learning as part of life. Do I like it? No. Do I jump on the table and dance from joy when I make a mistake? No. Yet, am I human? So, therefore, will I make a mistake? Yes. Mistakes are data, not evidence of inadequacy. They're data points to learn from and share those lessons learned. Keep a daily confidence log. At the end of the day, just write down one thing you did well today. One way you showed up with courage and effort, even if it didn't lead to perfection. And one thing you learned today. Just a brief log with 3 things. You can start a micro courage practice. So each morning, identify one small situation to step into that day, however small it is, such as sharing an idea in a setting you usually wouldn't speak up in, or any other small thing. And it could be a setting, not the most high stakes setting, but more a trusting setting where you still hesitate to speak up. So, what could be your micro courage practices? Do feedback pulse checks. So, invite others that you trust and whom you know will give you real feedback, both the things they really appreciate about you as well as the things they think you can improve on. And seek out those people that are supportive. Seek mentors and peers who can remind you of your strengths and who already have maybe are a little bit further on their journey or have that natural tendency to be positive psychology practitioners and to be learning from mistakes but not letting it beat them down. So surround yourself with the right kind of people. Okay, handling mistakes constructively. I did add this piece because I thought it's so easy to say, well, we all make mistakes, we're human, which is true, but how do you do that? Acknowledge timely that something is going wrong or went wrong, offer a brief explanation, but leaving out excuses, still owning it. Consider what was foreseeable, preventable, or not. Acknowledge the role that you played and additional factors, maybe the role that others played, but I think it's very becoming to start with what I own, what you own in the situation. Bring the best lessons that you discerned to the table, to the conversation, so everyone can move on wiser. Share what you may already have improved or changed or done, and then discuss what else you can do or someone else thinks you can do to deliver still on the expectations or to satisfy the stakeholder, whether that is a user, a client, a customer, a patient, a colleague, a different department. So it's a 7 step way of looking at mistakes and making sure that they keep your self worth intact, that they help you learn, and that bring across a confident yet accountable approach to your professional work. So, reflection and action. We're nearing the end. Spot self doubt. Those most common situations at work where second guessing or any other form of self doubt holds you back. That's the awareness piece. Number 2, recognize your inner critic. Write down those self doubt sentences. And how can you turn those into your inner coach voice? Maximize good moments. Think of a time you overcame self doubt and you still succeeded, or you still succeeded for the most part. What helped you take that step forward? And how could you use that courage or that energy again? Use confidence anchors. That is something stemming from neuro-linguistic programming, a different approach to growth and learning. Who in your life believes in you when you don't believe in yourself? Who is there, 1 or 2 people? And how do they show up? Choose some confident people that you know and have a conversation because, they may not always be as confident as they project themselves, but they have ways to keep their inner critic contained and small. And then adopt a future focus. If you were to carry yourself with just 10% or 15% more confidence, what would look different? What would you think and do differently? So, I would love for you, it's not for me, but it is for you, to share in chat one self doubt thought that you will leave behind and one confidence action you will carry forward for the remainder of this week. It's Wednesday, almost 1 p.m. Central Time, so there is enough time in the week, both professionally and personally. So please share. one self-doubt and make it as specific as you can that you will leave behind. And the reason why I'm asking you to write in chat is to share with each other and to give each other ideas. But also, once we write something down, it is stored differently in memory. And there is a higher chance that you will act on it as opposed to just thinking it. So, for those of you who were thinking, oh, yep, I got them in my head, maybe that's because your brain processes things differently. I honor, acknowledge, and enjoy and appreciate that, but also consider writing it down. If you don't do it in chat, write it down for yourself in front of you. And I see a lot of responses coming in. Excellent. Hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, excellent. So let's go to the next slide. This is the last reminder for you and myself. A basic fact about humans, people. We know ourselves from the inside, including all the doubts, insecurities, and thoughts we feed ourselves. Yet we know others only from the outside, even those that are loved ones that we think we know really well. We know them from what they happen to do and what they tell us, not who is behind the seemingly polished surface. So I don't know for any of you who've ever had presentation trainings. Sometimes it helps to realize that everyone um, is exposed when they're in the restroom. Everyone in your audience, or everyone had a time in their lives where they let out a burp or had some air coming out, right? So humanizing everyone can level the playing field. So with that, I know we missed a couple of minutes because I was kicked out, and I apologize for that, but I'm still here for questions that may live with listeners.
Yes, thank you so much, Carolyn. Thanks for sharing all of your wonderful knowledge on this topic. So yes, we'll move into the Q&A portion here quickly. Just before we do that, we do have a quick poll, so I'll just leave this on the screen. This helps us with future webinar topics as well as our webinar presentations in general. So please feel free to share your feedback on that. Can you go to the next slide? So thank you. And also, if you scan that QR code, it's also will be posted in the chat to share a little bit more in-depth feedback. We all really appreciate it shared with us as well as our presenter. So with that, we will move on to maybe two questions here quickly, and I'll let you all go back to the rest of your day. So our first question here is, let's see. In those moments on transitions and failure causes self-doubt, what are some strategies to keep these short term? How do you use this data to improve your skills, abilities in the long term?
Hmm, excellent question. So it's a two-part question, right? How can we keep it short term? That is by looking at, okay, this was a presentation or a report that didn't hit the marks. Let me remind myself of presentation or reports or whatever the item or deliverable is, where I was satisfied and sometimes maybe even excelled. And putting those two equally in front of you. And then how can you use the data? I always like to think in terms of what could have been one small action, thought, or sentence that I could have done in either in my preparation or in the execution that I could have done differently that would have resulted in a better presentation or exchange. One of them in more difficult conversations or when a conversation turns unexpected is usually for most people, I could have listened a little longer and asked a question rather than started defending myself or starting to speak and to present more arguments. So that is one specific way to use data to move on wiser and smarter. Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. And I think this is very relevant to kind of the environment we're in right now. So, any specific recommendations for someone in this tough job market with continuous rejections try to avoid becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy, thinking you aren't getting jobs because you aren't good enough. You doubt yourself more and then don't present well at interviews.
Mm. Very relevant, like Shanta said, in the current market, and a tough one, a tough nut to crack. I think, especially using the inner critic to the inner voice translation or reframing could be a really good activity so that you are not denying the fact that you may have had um, six denials or six even refusals to invite you to the first interview, yet turning all the thoughts you have about that, writing them out and turning them into inner coach voices. What did go well? What could I do differently? Who could I invite to the table to look at how I present myself in my application letter, or if you made it to an interview, into that interview. So that's a tough one. There are many strategies in the presentation that I think that would be helpful, but I think that the inner critic to the inner voice pertains specifically to the question how you can keep from that self-doubt becoming debilitating, because that is an easy pitfall that I'm sure a lot of people recognize. Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah. So if I didn't get to your questions, and I know there's quite a few, feel free to send them to ccabsinfo@umn.edu, and we'll make sure to get them over to Carolyn. So again, if you have more specific related questions, things like that, we can definitely get those over to her and have those answered for you. But I will move on here. So CCAPS does offer flexible workforce development solutions designed to equip employees with targeted knowledge and skills your organization needs. So if you're interested in this and our 15 non-credit certificates and multiple courses, please feel free to scan that QR code and connect with Beth Laurie, our business development manager. And next slide. As mentioned earlier, we will send a link to the webinar recording, and will be a recording of the live presentation today, and that will also be posted to our CCABS webinar archive and our CCABS YouTube page. And for those who are listening that are part of the university, you can use this webinar for points for the well-being. So that link was posted in the chat if you have any other questions for upcoming courses or other things. Our info will be listed on the last slide here. And Carolyn, I want to thank you again for being here with us today, and thank you all for joining us. You all have a wonderful rest of your day.
Same to you all. Thank you.